Yeah, we want to jump in and get straight to some breaking story. I saw him walking down the hall, and I'm glad he's taking a moment to be here with us. We're talking about Lions player. Dan Miller is here, our sports director. And when I saw you in the building this morning, I knew it was something serious. Yeah, but I never thought, since these things are so available to us nowadays, that gambling on your phone could be a suspendable endeavor, but it's more than just that.
Yeah, that is part of the story that we'll get to here, but let's just get to the nuts and bolts. An NFL investigation has resulted in 4 Lions being suspended for violating the league's policy on gambling. They are as follows. 2 players suspended indefinitely for betting on NFL games. Wide receiver Quintez Cephus and safety C.J. Moore. They can both apply for reinstatement in a year. However, they have been released. They are no longer with the organization. 2 players suspended for 6 games. They did not bet on the NFL, but did bet within a team facility. That can include any sports betting or casino betting on a mobile device. Those players were wide receiver Jameson and wide receiver Stanley Berryhill. Now, both Williams and Berryhill remain with the team. They can take part in their off-season program, which is ongoing. They can also take part in training camp and play in the preseason. They will have to leave the team when final cuts take place, have to sit out 6 games. At the midway point after 3 weeks, they can petition the league to get back into the facility in Allen Park to work out. But we should point out they will not be able to practice with the team at that point. Also, one other player from around the league, defensive end Shaka Tony of the Commanders, suspended indefinitely as well. So you touched on it, Lee. This is a new world that we're living in, where all you have to do is pick up your phone and you can bet on any sport, you can play in a casino, you can do any of those things. In the NFL, there are strict rules as to what you can and cannot do. Absolute cannot do for a player is betting on an NFL game. And that's what we're seeing with a couple of these players that were released. But picking up your phone and betting in a casino, in a locker room, you cannot do it. You cannot do it in the locker room. You cannot do it on the team bus. You cannot do it in the team hotel. You cannot do it in the stadium before a game. Those are all considered team settings where you cannot bet or gamble. And these players are advised of these rules. The NFL and the NFL Players Association goes over these rules with the players every year. So they should have been educated on what they can and cannot do.
Moving ahead, I know you talked about this with Ryan last hour, but draft coming up next week. You got 3 receivers who've basically been involved in all of this. Jameson Williams, of course, is the biggest name of those 3. What is the strategy? Because you got 2 first-round picks coming up next week.
Well, it does come back to football. I mean, you know, it's about these young men and their lives, but it is also about football. As you said, the draft coming up next week. Look. You have taken off your roster for 6 games one of the players that you thought would be your most explosive, most dangerous, a first-round draft pick that you were counting on to hit the ground running this year. 6 games in the NFL, guys, is a long time to not have one of your prime players. I do think it has the Lions now looking at the possibility of having to add to that wide receiving core. I already thought they might in this draft. I do think now that this becomes a more prominent possibility, depending upon how the draft board falls. But definitely this does impact having a roster spot for 6 games for a primetime player is a big deal.
It's quite a loss. We talk about the shift that we've seen in culture under Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes. How do you envision they bounce back from this setback here?
They're disappointed. I mean, Brad Holmes made that clear in his statement. They are disappointed in the decision-making process from these 4 young men. But what you have to do is continue to move forward with this. You have to continue to educate, and you have to continue that somewhere along the line, this is a life lesson that they can learn from. And not just that these 4 will learn from, but that everybody that is watching around that locker room says, man, this is real. And these NFL investigations are real, and there's real life consequences in this now. So there is what happens to these young men, and then there is the people keeping an eye on it all around the league today. Because believe me, this is blowing up everywhere around the National Football League.
I don't want to keep here because I know you got a busy day, but I do have a question, and that led to my question about the locker room morale, number 1. And number 2, is this something that is a showstopper for these are young guys we're talking about. Even the ones that got banned indefinitely, that's scary to me. Does that mean they will have a comeback? Will their careers be okay?
Well, Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons was suspended last year for betting on the NFL for a full season. He is going to play with Jacksonville next year,
Okay.
so he is ready to go. So you can apply for reinstatement after a year of an indefinite suspension. So he's a former first-round draft pick, terrific prospect. He's expected to resume his career in Jacksonville. So there is life after this.
Good.
For 6 games, you know, for Jameson Williams and Stanley Berryhill, we know what their time period is.
Right.
The indefinite suspensions, 1 year, then you can reapply. So there is life after this, but you're going to have to show the NFL that you're ready to go in there and handle these types of decision making.
We appreciate you coming in.
Dan, we appreciate it, man.
Guys,
Thank
appreciate
you.
you having me. Thank you.